Hi, all. Just a reminder again, I see some folks have just put an introduction in the chat. If you are specifically here as the voting member for your agency, please also send me, Amanda Sternberg, a message directly, just so I know who from your agency is here as the voting member. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I see people are coming in to the Zoom space. And welcome. Please, again, feel free to put your name and the organization or the group you're affiliated with in the chat box. And we're going to go ahead to get started. We, of course, only have a finite amount of time. And we have big decisions to be made, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I do anticipate we'll make quorum as we push through all of the information. Welcome to your Detroit CoC's special meeting of the general membership. I'm Celia Thomas. I'm the chair of the CoC board, and in that capacity, I will lead the meeting. And we'll make time for sharing of the information related to the decisions that the general membership are being asked to make today, and try to handle everything in good order with full respect of each other and understanding of our processes. So we have one agenda item, and that agenda item is to speak to the CAM transition and to speak to recommendations related to the change of the coordinated entry and coordinated assessment model activities for our CoC. At this point, I am going to turn it over to our CoC lead agency, and that is HAND. And Tasha is prepared to start with walking us through everything that's going to happen today. Tasha?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Thomas. Good morning, everyone. As Celia said, I am going to walk us through our presentation today. So I'll start with sharing my slides. I am going to be mindful of time. I am hopeful that we do have enough time here to get through everything in our slides, but I will be monitoring my time to make sure that there is enough time for the vote and for discussion. So I'm pulling up my slides now. I think, are you all able to see it?
Not yet, Tasha.
Okay, so I think it's still pulling up. My computer does not like Zoom.
There we go, we can see it now.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off. And as you all know from the meeting last week, you had a chance to hear from the CAM RQ Review Committee and their recommendations. And you will hear that recommendation again towards the end of this presentation. So what we're going to share in this presentation is really reiterating that recommendation, reiterating the process for how we got to that recommendation. And then also we will be going over some recommendations that are coming forth from the CAM transition team, as well as the CoC lead agency in the city of Detroit in terms of providing opportunities to provide services for parts B and D, B through D, which is our call center, in-person locations, as well as any back office services that are provided through CAM. So let me go ahead and get started. I've already talked a little bit about the agenda, so we'll go ahead and skip through that. Just as a reminder, if you are a voting member, we need you to sign in with Amanda via a direct chat and make sure that you indicate that you will be the voting member for your agency today. If you and your alternate is on this call, you'll have to decide who is going to place that vote and make sure that that person notifies Amanda. Just some logistics that voting will close either at 12 o'clock, which is the scheduled end of this meeting, or if we conclude early, voting will close at the end of the conclusion of our meeting. So please make sure you get your votes in. And then also it's important to note that if you don't, you must check in with Amanda to make sure that your vote is counted. All right. So let me talk about hands roll, especially as it relates to this presentation. So as you all know, we wear many hats, and we being HAND wears many hats with the Detroit Continuum of Care. We are your collaborative applicant, your CoC lead agency. We're also your HMIS lead as well. And in the course of this CAM transition, we have been chairing the CAM transition team, but we also threw our hats into the ring as an applicant in this CAM transition to a new lead agency. And so I just want to make it clear when I'm talking to you today, which hat I'm wearing and which role that I'm speaking from. So I will not be coming from the position of HAND as the applicant, but instead I'm coming to you as HAND, the CoC lead agency. And so I will be mindful of that throughout my conversation with you all. And if I, for some reason, seem to slip into one of my other hats, I would ask that you all kindly remind me to make sure that I'm wearing my CoC lead hat. So where we are is really at a bit of a conundrum with our CAM RFQ. So when we released the CAM RFQ, and I'm again speaking with my CoC lead hat, and so when we as a CoC released the CAM RFQ, we had anticipated receiving a fulsome amount of responses from agencies. And we believed that we would get a lot of responses from various agencies kind of based on some process that led up to it. We released a letter of intent or a letter of interest where we had about 6 to 8 organizations who had applied and shared that they were interested. We also held a number of pre-applicant workshops. And so we had great attendance or good attendance at those pre-application workshops. And then we held a mandatory workshop after the application was released, after the RFQ was released. And so we had a good amount of agencies that also showed up there as well. Again, roughly around 6 to 8 agencies that showed up there. And so we were very hopeful that at the time of submission of the RFQ responses that we would get a lot. Unfortunately, we didn't. And I think as a CoC, once this process concludes, I think we definitely will want to look into, are there better ways in which we could have done things? But as of today, where we is that we received 2 applications. One application was from HAND and one application was from the city of Detroit. And the way the RFQ was structured, it was also a bit complex, but something that the CAM transition team talked through and ultimately made a decision to release that RFQ that way. And so let me give you a little bit of context of the way it was structured and how those applications came in. So there were really two options that a agency who was applying could take when they submitted a proposal for the RFQ. One option was called an all-in. And essentially what that all-in option meant is that an agency could apply for all services. As in the RFQ, the services were broken up between parts A, B, C, and D, with part A being the CAM lead agency, part B being the call center, part C being in-person locations, and part D, being back office services. So for an all-in application, they were allowed to apply for, or had to really apply for, all of the services from parts A to part D. And this could include partnerships with that, but essentially they could apply for all of the services from part A to part D. And they also had the option of, when they said that they were doing an all-in, is that the application had to be considered in full, meaning there would be no substitutes for that application. It was either all or nothing, essentially, is a good way to think about it. The application also allowed for agencies to apply for individual pieces of the application. So an agency could apply for part A, they could apply for part B or part C, or maybe even a combination of those things if they so choose to do so. And so what we ended up with was actually both extremes. We received an application from the city of Detroit, which was an all-in application, and we received an application from HAN, which was just a piece, and that piece was part A. After those applications were reviewed and scored by the RFQ review committee, it left the committee, as you heard from last week, in a bit of conundrum. And the reason being is that for the all-in application, for part A, where there was another competitor, that being HAN, for the all-in application, it scored less than the other competitor, right? And then for the additional pieces, part B through D, 3 of 4 of those pieces fell below the RFQ's 70% threshold. So for that application, it left it in a bit of a conundrum. And then for the part A application, there was again another conundrum, because although that part of that application scored higher than the other part A, there were no other applicants other than the all-in that came in for parts B through D. So the RFQ review committee were left with a complex situation and really had to make a decision based on that. So this is the recommendation ultimately that the RFQ review committee landed on, and that is that recommend HAN to be the designated CAM lead agency. And then ultimately, they could not make a recommendation for services B through D, meaning access in-person, access call center, and the back office services, because of the all-in application, which had to be considered all or nothing. Lastly, they recommended, again, HAN as the CAM lead agency, and then working with the CoC and all of the CoC to determine the alternatives for finding services for B through D. So that's what you heard last week when Candace made her presentation, or Candace represented the RFQ review committee. Excuse me, please. So how did we get here? How did we get to such a scenario where we ended up with a recommendation that left us in a bit of a conundrum? Part of the reason how we got there is basically how the CAM transition team approved and decided to structure the RFQ. We, as the CAM transition team, went through various scenarios in various ways on how we could structure our RFQ. And we landed on 3 different options, essentially, as we had to make our decision. The first option would be kind of an all-in application. Basically, that meaning that the only way that people could apply is if they applied to provide all services. As you can see, there's some key benefits to that, but there's also some key considerations to that option as well. The second option was to only allow applicants to apply for various parts of it. Again, key considerations, but and key benefits as well. Lastly, the third option, which ended up being kind of a combination of options 1 and option 2, was to allow for both all-in applications and parts applications. And so ultimately, after much discussion, the CAM transition team decided to go with option 3, which was the combination. So you could allow for all-in applications or parts of the application. Now, in going for that, under key considerations, we did indicate that this would be complex. It would be complex in terms of the applicants who had to make a decision on how to submit their application. It would be complex in the scoring of the applications and the reviewing of the applications. And it could be complex in the implementation as well. That being said, though, the CAM transition team did decide to move forward with it. So this wasn't out of this conundrum that we find ourselves in, wasn't out of the realm of possibility. That was known going into the application. That was known going into how it was structured. And so we actually ended up with a situation where we were at the 2 extremes. So this is really a visual to kind of help you all understand how the city of Detroit applied and how HAN applied. I don't want to spend a lot of time here. I think I've already gone over pieces of this, but it just gives you a visual of what that looks like. For the HAN application, the thought is that there would be other applicants who would come in for parts B, C, and D. That didn't happen. And so again, we find ourselves in a conundrum. So now we've got to talk about what's the plan to move forward based on where we find ourselves, right? And I know that we are all concerned about us having a CAM that is operable past the end of Southwest's contract at the end of August, right? I understand that we are all concerned about that. And I think that's where our common thread is, and want to make sure that that's where we lean into is that common thread. I also am, I guess, a bit pleased that everyone is so concerned about this, because myself and a few other of my team members, I remember a time 10 years ago where CAM was a foreign concept to us all, right? And we didn't have this agency to do these services. And to be quite frank, some of us really weren't receptive to the ideal of having a CAM in place, right? And we fought it kind of tooth and nail, right? And so I 10 years now down the road, looking back to where we were then and where we are now, and we all have these concerns, it makes me proud, I guess I would say, to see how far this process has come and how we have embraced our CAM system and our CAM lead agency. And so I want to let you know that as someone who was at the table at the onset of this and there to be with the design of this, we're not going to let this thing fail, right? We know how important it is, and we know how important it has become to you all as well. And so we're going to be there as your CoC lead agency in the same way we were at the beginning, helping you all through the process, helping you all design and things of that sort. So we were there then, and we're going to be there. We're here in the transition, and we're going to be here post the transition, right? We are a partner with you all in the CoC, and we're part of the part of the reason that you all have us as a CoC lead agency is to help you navigate and plan for things like this, right? And so from the designing of the system through even being with you all through this transition and helping you lead you all through this transition, we are going to be here to help. And so I don't want you all to be concerned that there's not going to be a CAM going forward or anything of that nature. We are just as committed to you all as you are to this process. So what's going to happen today, excuse me, a bit of a cough. What's going to happen today is that we do need to vote on the recommendation from the CAM RFQ Review Committee. So we do need to make that vote. And then also what is going to happen today, because we heard you all loud and clear, and we've also been thinking about it, is we also want to present some recommendations to you all on if we decide to move forward with the CAM RFQ Review Committee's recommendation, what happens with services for parts B through D. And so you have some context in your voting, we're going to present all of that information before we start the vote process. So there's been a lot happening ever since the RFQ Review Committee released their recommendations. There's been a ton of meetings that are happening in the background. There's been recommendations. We've been exploring a lot of options is really what I'm trying to impress upon you all, to make sure that there is continuity of services, and then also that we build upon the things and make the improvements that you all have said you wanted to see. And so we've thought through some options, and here are some on this screen of some of the options that we thought through. And all those options, I think you can see that in addition to hand being at the table, we have also wanted to leverage the work that the city of Detroit has done in some way or some capacity. And so they have also been at the table and been thought through with these recommendations. And so again, there are a couple of options that we've explored between, providing services for parts B and D. They're here on the table, but what I really want to present to you is what we think is a good alternative. It's what I would maybe say an out-of-the-box solution, but this is really a forged partnership and a strong partnership between the city and the hand to make sure that the residents and those people who are experiencing homelessness will have services for shelter referrals and also, connection to those permanent housing options that CAM has been providing throughout these last 10 years. So what this looks like is the recommendation that we have for you all to plan for services for parts B through D would be for part A to be provided by hand. So this would be the recommendation as it was laid out by the RFQ, Review Committee. And that is that hand would be the CAM lead agency, and we will provide the services under that. And so what those services look like, some of those services are already outlined in the RFQ. And so I would, if you haven't, I would advise that you kind of take a look at the RFQ and see what that means from a CAM lead agency. But I can also go into a little bit of detail here as well. And so those CAM lead agency services is really coordination overall, it's systems level coordination and management and oversight of the CAM system. And so what that means is making sure that there's coordination and accountability for all of our CAM partners, right? So not just those who are providing services through parts B and D, but we also have street outreach providers that are providing services. We have community and home supports who are providing navigation services. And then excuse me. And then we also have you all as service providers that are receiving referrals and making connections to CAM. And so we will have oversight and just making sure that everything is coordinated and there is accountability. There are trainings and communication that the CAM lead agency will be providing. We will be working to facilitate the transition and any post-transition work. We would be overseeing the CAM SSO grant that currently is going through HUD, as well as some of the mission ESG funding, and then also working with our partners to make sure wherever there's funding gaps that we're helping to facilitate and get some funding for to fill those gaps so that we can bring you the most optimal system. In addition to some of those things as well, we will be looking at grievances and kind of handling grievances and publishing reports and things of that sort, all of this at the systems level. For the most part, we would not be doing any of the day-to-day operations work. However, when it comes to helping to set policies and procedures and iron out wrinkles and make improvements to some of those day-to-day operations and things of that sort, that's where the CAM lead agency would get involved in some of that day-to-day as well. For Part B, what we are recommending is that we really build on the city's application and also the recommendation of the review committee, who advised that we work together with the city of Detroit to figure out how to provide these additional services. And so in the city of Detroit's application, Wayne Metro was identified as the cost center. And so the recommendation is that they would be the cost center. Of course, these are all recommendations and draft, and so there's details to work out, but they would be the cost center via a subcontract with HAN. For Part C, which is the in-person locations, the city of Detroit would be providing those services. And then for Part D, which is the back office services, the city of Detroit will be providing those services, and it will be in partnership with HAN. So we would be working, the city of Detroit will mostly be the lead for that, but there will be some pieces of it that HAN will pick up as well. So what this means is for our community, first of all, is that we can ensure that there is some continuity in CAM during the transition and after the transition. And we would have all the services from parts A to Part D covered, right? Which I think is essential and the common thread that we're all leaning on. What this also means is that we have an opportunity to move forward the parts of the application that scored very well, which were parts A and part C, and that we also have an opportunity to build on parts B and D and make improvements where there may have been gaps in those pieces of the application. And we can do this all in a timely manner with resources coming to the table and ensuring continuity. Here's a quick visual of what that looks like. So again, it would be HAN being the CAM lead agency, Wayne Metro under a subcontract with HAN as the call center, and then the city of Detroit providing in-person access services as well as back office services. So this is the recommendation that we are jointly bringing before you all as the CoC general membership. This has been kind of worked out through a series of meetings behind the scenes, working with the city of Detroit and other partners and talking with the CAM transition team as well. So this is what we want to present to you all as an alternative to being able to provide those services for B through D. At this point, I want to hand things over to our partners at the city of Detroit, and they can talk us through some other pieces of this proposal that we're bringing to you all, or these recommendations. David Bowser.
Thank you, Tasha. So David Bowser here, Associate Director of the Housing and Ruralization Department. As Tasha mentioned, the city did submit an all-in application. But I think that, everyone here has the same objective, which is to have a functional system in place for residents that need it the most. And so what we've been doing, as Tasha mentioned, is having conversations around how do we best blend and braid our strengths? How do we best build on existing partnerships? How do we meet the timeline that we have in order to have a functional system moving forward? And so just wanted to kind of run through some of the conclusions that we are trending towards. Again, there are a few steps, agreements, additional conversations that have to happen, but it sounds like each of the entities between the city and HAN are exhibiting an amount of flexibility that could very well result in a much expanded, more comprehensive sort of service than what the alternative may be. And so just kind of walking through the resident experience based on what we have scoped out a bit thus far. With Wayne Metro, obviously with hand at the top as the CAM lead agency, kind of overseeing the strategic development, the overall policies and procedures of this entire operation. You have Wayne Metro being the call center. And so a bit of context, Wayne Metro currently operates a variety of call centers and different initiatives on behalf of many different partners. What launched last week and inside the city of Detroit is what's called the Detroit Housing Resource Helpline, which is sort of a one-stop shop for residents who have housing needs. The idea is to eventually be able to integrate this helpline with a CAM functionality so that if a resident is calling for shelter, they actually may qualify. We already know they may qualify for different programs, so they don't have to actually go to a shelter. So for example, if you're a resident who lives in a land bank home, there's a program that exists to actually shelter you and get you permanently housed. So instead of, calling to receive shelter, or even if a resident feels like they may need shelter, they can call this one-stop shop number that's integrated with the CAM, where a questionnaire is asked to see if they actually do need emergency shelter or there's an alternative. So what we're looking to do there is kind of alleviate some of the pressure on the shelter system by providing additional resources to residents. This one-stop shop helpline is being expanded out to tenants, is being expanded out to residents currently experiencing homelessness. It's being expanded out to even homeowners and potential home buyers so that residents know exactly where to call for any sort of housing needs. So with that, the idea, if possible, would be to eventually integrate the phone number, or at least route individuals to this resource so they can have access to a broader scope of programs. And in effect, many people would actually be routed to other than emergency shelter resources. And so that would be the first stop for many people within this particular construct. If they do need emergency shelter, the next stop are the access points. The idea right now is to establish 3 access points across the city to make sure that residents actually can access those access points. Within the prospective budget that we have, there's a transportation component where residents can actually be transported from where they are now to an access point so that they can receive the services that they need there before being either diverted or before being routed to a shelter service. And so now you're moving into the access point and back office section of the graph here, where transportation assistance would be provided within this particular budget to a shelter, unless diversion has been successful in that particular instance. At the shelter, you also have walk-in components there. So you have a schematic where the individuals have a dotted line down to the shelter. You also have a dotted line from individuals to the access points, meaning that you don't just have to call in order to get access to an access point or to a shelter. You can also walk in. And so walking into an access point is an additional way to receive services, as well as walking into a shelter. The establishing of, you see a pink bubble called a mobile CAM team. The establishment of mobile CAM teams will ensure that walk-ins will actually be entered into HMIS and receive the services that they need as well. And so this is another strategy that's being added that we're talking about to make sure that residents are input into the system so that they can receive the services that they need. And then there's a housing navigation component. So just highlighting that the city is also working on other initiatives to provide greater services within the shelter system. Within a different space, Tara and myself are working on sort of a medical and substance use disorder kind of mobile team to be available for residents who are experiencing homelessness or even unsheltered homelessness, as we know that those issues can be barriers to housing. So how can we better prepare residents to receive housing services by addressing sort of their holistic issues? These are some of the things that we would like to integrate within the shelter system from the city perspective, as well as we begin to partner within this initiative. So you have a blue bubble in terms of housing navigation. The city is funding an organization to provide navigation services to residents within shelters to make sure that they can end their homeless journey, thereby creating more capacity within the shelter systems as we see less kind of frequent flyers and as we end that homeless journey with a successful housing outcome. So what we're looking to do is kind of create a holistic system from end to end, first by diverting people away from the shelter system if they do qualify, for other resources having to do with housing, getting access points set up so that residents can widely access this service, and then also integrating more services within actual shelters within this particular plan. So if you go to the next slide, just talking about some of the things that have yet to be sort of settled in, but we're trending towards settling these items so that we can land upon a comprehensive plan. So needing, council and administrative approval before any of this becomes a reality. But really this slide is just to say we are still in the process of, first of all, receiving your feedback, receiving the community's feedback in terms of whether or not this plan really meets the need. The city's all-in application does use feedback over the course of time from residents who are experiencing homelessness and from service providers to make sure that these services are appropriate for the population that we're dealing with, but also speaking with HAND about how HAND would like this to be built out. And so the city and HAND, again, are speaking very closely and also looking forward to the feedback from this group as well.
Thank you, David. So in sum, you have heard what we have put together as recommendations for you all as a community, ultimately for services B through D. Again, these are tentative. These have evolved over the course of the last week and a half or so. So there's definitely more details and more plannings that would need to happen to really finalize these and bring them to fruition. But I believe that this is a good start, and hopefully some answers to your questions from last week as to what could or what would happen with services part B through D. So at this point of the presentation, I am going to hand things back over to Celia so that we can begin our voting process. As I mentioned earlier, that what we wanted to do was, before you begin to vote for the CAM RFQ committee's recommendation, just to be able to give you some additional context about what could happen for parts B through D. So I'm going to hand things back over to Celia. I do see a hand from Amanda Sternberg. So you want to go ahead, Amanda?
Yes, sorry, it took me a minute to find my mute. So this is just a quick note for those of you on the meeting. For some people, I have sent a direct message to you that I do need a response from, just to confirm who is the voting member from your agency. So there's a couple of folks I've either sent you a message asking you to confirm with me that you're here to vote, or I have sent you a message saying that both of your voting members are here, and I don't yet know which one of you will be voting. So if you have a direct message from me and you've not yet responded to it, please do so ASAP so that we can know have the appropriate records for who's voting. I will say we do have a quorum. We have the vast majority of our voting members here, which is great. Again, please take a moment to see if I have sent you a direct message that you have not yet responded to. Please do so accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So you've heard the instructions. Make sure you check in with Amanda. Make sure you check your direct chat messages and reply to that because that's the way your vote is going to be eligible. As I mentioned earlier, voting will close either at the conclusion of this meeting or 12 o'clock, whichever occurs first. Some things to note about this voting is that because typically as your CoC lead agency, we handle and manage all of the voting process, but because HAND is an applicant in this process, CSH, one of our partners and also a CAM consultant, is going to be receiving and tabulating and verifying today's votes. And so they will be sharing with you when the voting starts a link for you to submit your votes. And then also a couple of things to note for various parts of, there's going to be a couple of different votes. And I'll indicate that in just a moment on the screen, that at different times, different parties will need to be recused. So for all of the votes today, hand will be recused. So that means that we will not be voting on any of the votes today. And then there is one particular vote where if Wayne Metro, the city of Detroit are also named. And so on that particular vote, they will be recused from that as well. So let me give you a quick overview of the various votes, and then we'll take them one by one. The first would be that of the review committee's recommendation, and that would be to designate HAND as the CAM lead agency. The second vote would be around for the general membership. As you all know, time is of the essence, right? So we have to have all of these details worked out and the transition and all of that stuff completed by the end of Southwest contract, which is at the end of August 31st. We don't, however, have another general membership meeting scheduled until July. And so it's going to be pertinent that as we work out some of the details for parts B through D, that there is a body who is meeting consistently and working through some of those details. And so the request would be, as we're moving through the plans for parts B through D and finalizing that you all as general members would designate that responsibility and authority to kind of finalize those plans with the CAM transition team. Now, a note down here is that if there are any significant changes, and some examples are changes in partners, decreases in services offered or something of that sort, then that will come back to the general membership. But otherwise, if it's just finalizing the details of what has already been presented to you all, then the CAM transition team will have the authority to do so. So I am going to just move into the first vote and then hand things back over to our chair, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Tasha. And thank you to people for putting your questions in the chat and to folks for answering questions in the chat. We are at that space where we need to move through the various motions, as Tasha said. Motion number one is for the CoC general membership to vote for HAND to be designated as the CAM lead agency. I need a motion and I need support for that motion. I can take it either via chat, or if someone wants to come off their mic and speak, that's fine as well.
Dr. Celia, this is Candace. I would like to make the motion that HAND be designated as the CAM lead agency.
Okay, thank you so much, Candace. We have a motion. Is there support?
I support Regina.
Thank you, Regina. The motion has been moved and supported. We will take the vote. As Tasha mentioned, the CSH, Corporation for Supportive Housing, is our partner that will manage all the responses coming in from this vote. The link to vote is in your chat box. And so we need you to click the link to vote, go there, fill it out, and yep, there you go.
Dr.
Jasmine just dropped it. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but since the motion has been seconded, made and seconded, we also have to have time for discussion if need be.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasha. I said it in my head and it didn't come out my mouth. Thank you, Tasha. So if we can have time for discussion if there's any.
My name is Alan Rosetto. I have a question.
Okay.
It was brought to my attention by a previous board member of HAND that there may be some wordage in the continuum of care guidelines about HAND being specifically fiduciary and statistical paperwork. Is there any changes that need to be made to the guidelines in order for Han to actually do this, or has that already been done?
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'm not aware of what you're referring to. Han was the first CAM, we held the first CAM fiduciary, we held the first CAM SSO grant for 3 years prior to releasing it to Southwest as they got their footing. So this is a role that we've played before, and this is something that we continue to play with MISTA grants and also another HUD grant. So to my knowledge, I'm not sure the information that you're referring to, but we already currently serve in this capacity with HUD grants and with MISTA grants.
Okay, thank you. Question asked and answered.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments related to the motion on the floor? So folks, 10 minutes is a long time. How did you decide on 10 minutes?
Madam Chair, I'd like to call the question.
There you go, sir. Thank you. Dr. Curley? Is there any other reason we need to keep waiting for comment?
No, I'm calling the question, so if there's a second to that motion, we can move on.
Is there any other? Yeah, thank you. And who was that? I'm sorry.
It was Amy.
Okay, hi, Amy. Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Curley has called the question. Amy Brown has responded affirmatively with support. We can move to vote. And as I mentioned before, it's motion number 1. The link is in your chat box, posted by Jasmine Lewis from Corporation for Supportive Housing. If you would please proceed to the link if you intend to vote and complete that form. How's it going, Jasmine?
It looks like we have 31 responses. So we're missing.
In terms of percentage?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm sorry, in terms of percentage, what percent of our membership has voted? The membership on record today, do you know?
Got you. So I have 31 responses as to the number of folks that have voted. I believe that we have 32. So 32 folks here that should
who are eligible to vote. Okay. If there's one person who hasn't voted, if you would please record your vote.
And Dr. Thomas, if I may interject, Jasmine is also going to have to do some verification on the back end. So once we get the one other person, if they want to vote, then we could probably move on to the second motion.
Okay,
Looks like I got 34 responses, so that means we should be all set. Thank you.
all right, thank you. So we can move on to motion number 2. And you have motion number 2 on your screen in our Zoom meeting. And it is that I'll take a motion for general membership to designate the CAM transition team as the authority to work with HAND and the City of Detroit to finalize and approve a plan for call center services to be provided by Wayne Metro and in-person and back office services to be provided by the City of Detroit. Guys, there's some fine print. Let me just turn my camera off so I can read it. And the fine print says, please note that any significant changes, as in changes in partners or services offered, etc., any significant changes to the draft recommendation will need to be approved by the general membership before the plan can be finalized. So that is your motion number 2. I'll take a motion and support, please.
I'll motion Donna Price.
Thank you, Donna
I
Price. Is there
second.
support?
I second Regina Hance.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Motion number 2 has been moved and duly supported. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but I raised my hand. I just want to say there, like not discussion necessarily, but just really want to thank everyone who really leaned into this and helped create this more in-depth plan. I know that when we were presented at this with general membership last week, just sort of part A, and now we have the second part, the second motion, and really want to thank those who came to the table and helped create that out of a response to really questions at general membership that I think said we wanted to know more information and figure things out. So really just want to thank, I know there's been a lot of meetings since last Tuesday and today to get to this point. And so really want to thank those who took time to do that and to really help us get to this really inclusive plan and for us to figuring it out as a system, to think differently and to just look into that. Really want to thank people for that.
Thank you, Amy Vaughn. I apologize, I didn't see your hand. Is there any other comment or question related to motion number 2?
Seeing no additional hands in the chat, I'd like to motion to call the question, Dr. Thomas. This is Dr. Curley.
Hi, Dr. Curley. Is there support for Dr. Curley's motion to call the question?
I'll support Donna Price.
Okay, that has been moved and supported. And so Jasmine has put in another link to the chat for the second vote. If you would click that second link coming from Jasmine in the chat box to register your second vote. And Jasmine, can you give us any update on the response, please?
Looks like we have 26, 28 gives me responses for motion 2, so we're dismissing a few folks.
And so we have about 6 folks who have not yet voted as of Jasmine's last sentence. And I'm encouraging you to please hit the link. As you know from the previous vote, you have 3 options. You can choose yes, you can choose no, or you can abstain.
Jasmine, we've had a request if you could put the, I think the voting link, again in the chat box.
For the second one?
Second vote.
I'm gonna guess for the second one. The individual who sent that direct message to me, if you could put it in the chat. Yes, the second voting link.
Sure.
Thank you.
How's it going, Jasmine?
Looking for my unmute. It looks like we have about 30, I'm refreshing 31 votes, so
Okay.
some person did not vote.
Okay, Jasmine.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I received a direct message from an individual as well who's having some technical difficulties with the form. They're indicating that they get a message that says there was a temporary problem and to try again later. Do you have any?
No, I'm not familiar with the challenge. I can put it in the chat again.
Okay.
Can they directly, would it be possible for that person to directly send their vote to Jasmine?
I think that would be great. So I would say the individual who messaged me, if the link does not work for you, please send a direct message to Jasmine Lewis indicating your vote.
In which, I guess, clarifying which motion is on to.
Yes.
It appears that we have 36 responses for that second motion.
Okay. And so we should close on that motion. Okay, Jackie?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was for someone else. Sure. We have 32 folks that should have voted today. We had 36. So I'm trying to do some reconciliation and figure out how we had so many.
Okay, and I've seen the chatter in the chat box, and as you've been told, the results of the vote will be published on CAN's website. And we, Jasmine, Corporation for Supportive Housing, will go through to make sure that everyone who is eligible to vote has voted or registered with her. And then the results of the vote will be published. At this point, we are gonna adjourn. I'd like to just say a few words from me. You know, I'd like to say thank you to all the members of our CoC for participating in this process. I don't know if you all have ever heard me in some space or another comment on the fact that our CoC work is often, for many of us, like a second job. And I truly believe that the keys to making our CoC work often involve that commitment to pursuing the best for the people experiencing homelessness, a willingness to take all types of feedback, that would be positive and critical feedback. It takes all of us giving each other grace as well, and all of us recognizing that for many of us, this effort of addressing homelessness is personal, it is painful, and it brings much passion. And bottom line is, we will all keep working to end homelessness and or to make homelessness rare and brief, and to the extent that we can, one time. Again, thank you so much for showing up today, and I wish all of you a safe Memorial Day weekend, and we'll be publishing results as quickly as possible. Thank you. And goodbye.